Could the USA end up going to war? The problem is that as the USA grows and becomes a global dominant superpower, they make lots of friends, but they also make lots of enemies. Being a powerful country comes with some responsibility. As Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. USA wants to defend lots of countries. It's got a lot of friends, a lot of interests, a lot of pals who have oil. But the problem is that when you have a lot of people you want to defend, that means you have to defend them from something. Could this mean that the USA gets sucked up into a war that it does not want? Or maybe does want secretly? Well, maybe. Let's have a look at the news then. So, starting off this week, the Philippines. America and the Philippines have recently shaken hands and built up a great alliance, or as Biden called it, an ironclad security deal. The USA has stationed troops in the north of the Philippines, I think, hoping to protect a part of the sea that is contested by not just China, but also by Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, I think, lots of countries vying for a certain spot of water. I wonder what is there. Surely not natural resources and oils, perhaps. This debate goes back in Southeast Asia for a long time. Who owns this part of the sea? The South China Sea, China calls it. The West Philippine Sea, maybe. Lots of little areas that are of a great interest to countries. What happened recently is that Philippine coast guards were going into the areas of the sea that they claim were theirs, but the parts that China claim belong to China instead. And as you can imagine, these boats have been having some scuffles. It seems, from what we understand, China has been the more antagonistic one. They fired water cannons at the Philippine Coast Guard. They also used ramming techniques several months ago to knock the Philippine boats off course. These water cannons are not like your regular water pistols during a summer holiday. It's not like, psst, psst, I gotcha. These are powerful things. They have the power to break roofs on the boats. As you can see here, some Western journalists got on board the Philippine boats to film as they were bombarded by Chinese water cannons. Joe Biden, the American president, has called his alliance with the Philippines ironclad. Ironclad is the same word they used for their alliance with Israel, which we'll get onto shortly. But it shows that if China are going to start ramming Philippine boats, America is going to retaliate. And as tensions increase in the sea, it's looking more and more likely that America will be forced to jump to the Philippine defense. I say forced. America have said they will jump to their defense. It's not something they said under duress. They wanted to do it. Just across the sea, you have Taiwan. Now, the USA have pumped billions into Taiwan for defense purposes. China claims that Taiwan is the original China and that they will reunite like long lost brothers. The semiconductor industry is booming in Taiwan. It is estimated that if Taiwan did go to war with China, the global economic repercussions would be severe. A Chinese war or invasion of Taiwan would be very damaging for Taiwan. The Chinese army are suspected to be the biggest military force in the world. We're talking 2 million active combatants that would be able to take Taiwan by sea, air, and foot. So Taiwan wouldn't survive, most likely, for very long if China were to try and invade. But with American intervention on the water and in the air, it could change things very drastically. It would be an extremely ugly war, though. A lot of analysis suggests that it would be devastating for both America and China, both in terms of combatants and also the economy. Why the economy? Well, why do you think America is so interested in Taiwan? Taiwan is one of the leading production places for semiconductors. That's the little chip that provides the phone that you're probably using to watch this. It also powers weapons. Taiwan has a monopoly of the semiconductor industry at the moment, something which America has been trying to invest in, something which America is trying to get their hands on, but something which China is also trying to compete with. China will be watching Russia. We'll get onto that shortly. And they'll be seeing how the economic repercussions have affected Russia's invasion of Ukraine, something the West have condemned. And they'll be wondering whether or not it is worth invading Taiwan at this stage. So you could argue that China's desire for Taiwan is merely patriotic, merely something they want for ownership. Or you could argue that it's, as per usual, all about the money. Not so much old news, but just across the water again, you have South Korea. Now, South Korea have been at war technically, theoretically, with the North Korea, for decades. They've got the DMZ zone, the demilitarized zone, I should say, which is that area between the border between North and South, heavily guarded, big military personnel of the North and South Koreans. But in case a war breaks out again, there are troops stationed there as well. American troops have been stationed in South Korea for some time, along with plenty of investment and help in an attempt to deter the North Korean government. It also is also worth pointing out that in the waters near North Korea, America does often do military drills with the South Koreans. They chuck, some ballistic missiles into the sky and say, "Look, you want to fight us? Look what we can do." It goes back and forth. The North Koreans say, "Stay away from me," and the Americans and South Koreans say, "Stay away from us." Difficult when you have a land border that separates the two countries, South Korea and North Korea. Ironclad is not just something that the US has committed to the Philippines. They've also, for many, many decades, since the beginning of its official creation, given Israel ironclad commitments as well. And we saw this a couple of weeks ago when Israel and Iran rubbed shoulders. Israel struck an Iranian consulate in Syria, which Iran perceived as a direct hit. It is deemed under most international law that hitting a consulate is equivalent to hitting a country. Iran therefore struck back with 300 rockets and drones into Israeli territory at something like 2 in the morning. Now, Israel were mostly equipped to deal with this. It was seen as a symbolic thing by Iran. Iran most likely knew that Israel would have been able to successfully take down the attack with their fortified Iron Dome, which they did. But that didn't stop America being involved. They reportedly had an official from the Pentagon who was in the Israeli control room. They also had American, English, and French forces there as well. The English RAF were there to make sure that no rockets landed on Israeli territory. Israel claimed that it was 99% revoked. Most rockets and missiles did not hit Israeli territory. But the USA were panicking when Iran threatened to hit back Israel for the consular attack. America was starting to panic a little bit. A war with Iran would have been devastating for all kinds of purposes, economic, military-wise. No one wants it. They were allegedly telling Israel to calm things down, to not strike back, to not do anything if Iran hit them. When Iran did, Israel did say they would hit back. It has kind of fizzled out for the time being. But perhaps the biggest recipient of goodwill gestures is Ukraine at the moment. We say goodwill. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 was deemed by European and American officials as a security threat for the West. Both Biden and Donald Trump have now said that if Russia were to take Ukraine, that would be bad for America. So therefore, what we're looking at is actually more of a bipartisan agreement that Russia should not go into Ukraine. Therefore, America have pumped billions into Ukraine's defense of Russia. Just recently, a $60 billion package deal was approved. This is not raw cash, by the way. This is not secret money in an envelope. This is weapons that have been paid for already. We're looking at guided missiles, looking at air defense systems, that sort of thing. Russia would have probably been able to take Ukraine much faster if it hadn't have been for European and American intervention. Russia have now resorted to their propaganda in saying that the money America gives to Ukraine disappears for corruption reasons, and that's why America shouldn't give money to Ukraine. They've also argued that if America were to do certain things, such as putting American troops in Ukraine, that would be the red line for Russia. Russia have regularly threatened to even use nuclear strikes on NATO. Which brings me to the final point, NATO. America is one of the biggest providers of money into NATO, the big club of defensive countries that argue if you strike one country in NATO, you strike all of them. Therefore, Russia is not just arguing with America and the West, Russia is arguing with NATO. In fact, Russia has claimed they are in an existential war with NATO, a huge alliance of which you probably wouldn't want to fight, but Russia seems prepared to do so at the moment. No wonder then that Donald Trump, the former president and potential president again, has said that countries who are in NATO should be spending at least 2% of their budget, the defense budget, putting it into NATO. It is now reportedly rumored that he is thinking of rising it to 3%. Because the reality is that if NATO was struck, America would most likely have to jump to the defense. Article 5 says that a country does need to protect other NATO countries. So that's another war that America could find itself in. So what have we got? We've got Philippines, we've got Taiwan, we've got South Korea, we've got Israel, we've got Ukraine, we've got NATO. And I'm just skimming the surface. I've not even bothered going into the regions of Africa, for example. I've not gone into most parts of the Middle East. I've just been looking at mostly Asia, Southeast Asia, and a little bit of Europe. There's more that I couldn't even fit into this video. The USA may have come in with good intentions or self-preservation perhaps for financial reasons, but as it stacks up its allies, it will undoubtedly stack up its enemies too. That could mean that America finds itself in war, whether it wants to or not.